So without further ado, Theresa Reno-Weber.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So depending on why you're here tonight, this is either going to be like the dessert before the meal, or it's going to be an extra helping of vegetables. So hopefully you'll be pleasantly surprised if you didn't come here to hear this performance or this presentation. But I'm really excited that Chris and Downtown Grand Rapids, Inc. brought me here to speak with you about driving performance excellence in the public sector. It's something that I'm extremely passionate about. I've spent over 75% of my career working in the public sector and the rest of it in the private. And I can tell you that whether you are in government or nonprofits or in business, the things that I'll share with you that we're doing in Louisville to try to continually deliver excellent results to our citizens are things that you can apply in any organization in which you may work. And why it's so important, let's see if I got this, is because it delivers real results. And so these are some of the examples of real results that we've accomplished in Louisville over the last 3 years. We've reduced expenditures by over $3 million, or what was 12% of our budget deficit at the time. We've increased productivity, the way our employees work across city government, by over $5 million. Reduced the number of public facilities across our community, so restaurants, swimming pools, that weren't receiving public health inspections on time. We got that down to less than 0.1% from a high of over 10% at one point. We were able to cut processing time by over 50% for services that citizens come to city government for all the time, whether it's permits or rezoning processes. We were also able to, in effect, add more resources to the street for our EMS department. So more ambulances who were able to get to citizens in medical needs by simply reducing the amount of time it took for them to turn out of the hospital after dropping off a patient. And we're focusing on broader community goals, just like you are here in Grand Rapids, around increasing the educational attainment for our citizens and improving wages and improving the number of jobs that we have within the city. And we're doing all of this while trying to build lasting systemic processes within city government and capabilities within the employees in city government that will be there for years to come and will ensure that we have results like this on a recurring basis. So that's what I'm hoping to share with you over the next bit of time that we have together, how we've done all of this. But before I do that, I'll give you a little bit of my background and my story. So I'm not from Louisville originally, even though I can say it like a pro, Louisville. And I will every now and then say things like, bless her heart, which is not good. If you know, somebody says that's not necessarily a good thing. But I've been there for about 5 years now. I hail from a suburb of Hartford, Connecticut. So I will probably use hand gestures and speak with some sort of northern accent from that region every once in a while. But I come from a really large Italian male-dominated family. And most of my family, well, the men in my family, had served in the military in some way, shape, or form. And so I was very interested in following in their footsteps and serving in the military. And so when I went to school, I went to the Coast Guard Academy, spent 4 years there, and like every service academy, Annapolis, West Point, you do 4 years, you graduate, you get a commission in the service. So I spent the initial part of my career in the Coast Guard. And I was stationed in San Francisco, in Miami, Florida, and Washington, D.C. And I had jobs that ranged from enforcing UN sanctions against Iraq in the Persian Gulf in 2001. Just a little unique for a Coast Guard cutter, but we were part of a surface action group with the Navy. And all the way to being a liaison for the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. And educating Congress members and their staff about what the Coast Guard needed in terms of authorizations and appropriations. After my 6 years of committed service for the free education I received, I decided I was going to leave and go get a degree in public policy so that I could get on the other side of the implementation of policies and start crafting and writing policies myself. And so I was fortunate enough to get into Harvard's Kennedy School, and even more fortunate that I went there because it's where I met my husband. So the reason why I'm in Louisville is because he is from Louisville, and so brought me back there a little bit later in our journey together. After my degree, I felt really strongly that I needed to learn a little bit more about what business does. I'd spent most of my time now in the public sector and really thought that there was more that I could understand and learn about how business approached tough problems, with the thought of bringing that back to the public sector in a future career. I wanted to know what I didn't know. And I had this thought that the private sector has different benchmarks for recognizing when they're doing things well and when they're not. And sometimes that gets muddled in the public sector. It's a little bit harder to understand if you're really succeeding, and people don't always know the metrics by which to measure their success by, or are held accountable to do that. And so I learned quite a bit when I was working for McKinsey & Company, which is a global strategic consulting firm. And I served clients that were Fortune 500 companies, and I also worked with the federal government and the DoD. And a lot of my work centered around strategic planning, operational efficiency and effectiveness, taking things like lean process improvement, which is done mostly in the manufacturing world, and bringing that into services industries. And I loved what I was doing. I had a really great time doing it. But it was around this time, I was in Washington, D.C. working for McKinsey, that my husband got his dream job in Louisville, and we decided to move there. And luckily for me, it was fortunate timing because I was also pregnant with twins, and being a consultant and living in a one-bedroom apartment in D.C. with no car just didn't really do it for us. So we moved to Louisville, where he had family, and I continued to work for McKinsey for a couple more years until I realized that traveling 4 days a week with 2 small kids was not the life I wanted. And at that time, I was very fortunate because the newly elected mayor was about a year into his first term, and he was looking for a chief of performance improvement. And this was a new role. City government had never had a chief of performance improvement, but Mayor Fisher was a former CEO and entrepreneur, and also believed that he could take the lessons he had learned in the business sector and put them into city government, and was looking for somebody to help him do that. And so 3 years ago, in January of 2012, I joined Louisville Metro Government to establish what's now called an Office of Performance Improvement. And I'll talk to you more about all of the work that we're doing, but the result of it are some of the things that I shared with you on the slide previously. Now, within the last 6 months, my role's changed a little bit more, and I'm now the Chief of Performance and Technology. So I oversee still the Office of Performance Improvement, but I also oversee the HR department and the IT department in Metro Government. And I like to think of it as now having the processes, people, and technology required to improve Metro Government all under one umbrella. And so that's a little bit about me. Let me give you a little bit about Louisville. This is our beautiful city skyline. How many of you have been to Louisville before? Yes, you guys are awesome. I have to say, this is the first time I've been to Grand Rapids, so I feel a little guilty. So you've all been to Louisville. But a little background or history about Louisville. Our city's population, just about 760,000 in the city, and then in the MSA, 1.3 million, spread out across 400 square miles. We have demographics that are pretty similar probably to Grand Rapids, 70% white, 20% African American, and 10% international. Our city government is different than here in Grand Rapids. We have a strong mayor form of government. The city and county actually merged back in 2003 after, I think, 40 years of trying to get that passed. It finally passed. And with our mayor, we have a 26-member Metro Council. Metro Council approves the budget for the city, but the mayor is the executive. They're more of the legislator side. And then the size of our government, about a $600 million budget, 24 departments with over 6,000 Metro employees, and a very strong union workforce across all of the city. So we've been getting a lot of accolades since 2012. And I love to see the progression of these. I don't know if you look at 2012, we got a lot of great things that we were very proud of at the time. And we like to say that we were, you know, a city of well-fed, compassionate men. Thank you, GQ, for the manliest town in America. But as you progress up, you start to see things that are much more consistent with really strong cities on an economic upturn, right? The types of things that you want to be if you're a middle of America city that's trying to compete with the Chicagos and the Bostons and the Nashvilles and the Atlantas and all of those other cities around the country that are attracting talent. So we, in 2014, we're Best Entrepreneurial Cities, America's Breakout City, a Most Affordable City, a lot of great things that we're really proud of. And there are some similarities with Grand Rapids. We are both river cities, lots of industry in our history. In Louisville, we have 5 main industry clusters that we focus on. Logistics is a big one for us. UPS's logistic hub is centered in Louisville. Advanced manufacturing, we have GE and Ford. Lifelong wellness and aging care is another one. Humana, Atria, ResCare, those are all there. Food and beverage, really big for us. Yum Brands, which has KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, and Papa John's are all some of the bigger companies that are headquartered there. We also have a really great local food movement. And of course, our 5th food group. Bourbon. Yes, bourbon. So our 5th food group. And we're trying really hard to work with the state and with the other counties to make Louisville similar to what Napa Valley was able to do for wine, we want to do for bourbon. And so we're working really hard to create that experience. So if you come down, you can do the Bourbon Trail, have a great meal, go to the Slugger Museum, the Muhammad Ali Museum, which brings me to the other similarity between our 2 cities. Boxing greats, Mayweather and Muhammad Ali, which I thought was very interesting. But that all aside, we still have a problem with our city government, right? And we have a perception issue as well that's probably driven by a lot of experiences that our citizens have. Government embodies our highest aspirations and our lowest expectations. If you think about it, there's a lot we expect from government. Everything from protecting our civil liberties to picking up our trash. But a lot of times I hear people say, well, that's the federal government, or that's city government, they're slow, it's bureaucratic, there's a lot of red tape, of course it takes forever. We just don't expect a lot in those areas of service, of customer service. We are okay with, I guess, all the red tape. Or we're not happy with it, but we just expect it. And with Mayor Fisher, when he came in, again, like I said, he was a former CEO and entrepreneur, he really did believe that this didn't have to be the case. That city government is just another organization. Like any organization, it can be nimble, it can be innovative, it can be responsive to its customers, and it can do better than the expectations that we currently put on it. And so that was the charge that I had going in. And I had a little bit of a roadmap. The mayor had put a commitment out to citizens when he first took office that says, these are the things that I'm going to commit to you as mayor. And 2 of them really spoke to me. Quality customer service and a focus on results. And for some of our departments and for some of our employees, that was a new thing for them. I mean, I remember having conversations with department directors who said, I don't have customers. Why am I focused on customer service? And so that paradox shift in their mind of a citizen as a customer, of an internal customer, right? If you're the HR department, you do have customers. The other departments, the departments you're working to help hire employees for. If you're at IT, same thing, you have customers. So putting that mindset in place. And what we did was create an entire system of performance and innovation for city government that didn't exist before. And it really sprung out of us trying to answer 3 key questions. What is it we're trying to do? Right? It's critical to know. What are we trying to accomplish as a city? What are our goals? What are our aspirations? What is it that citizens expect from us? What did they vote the mayor in on? What was his campaign promises? How are we delivering on those? So what are we trying to do? How well are we doing it? Right? So we said we're going to do this. Now, how well are we doing against what we've committed to doing? And then finally, how can we do it better? And so I'll talk in a little bit more detail about some of these areas, although I won't go into too much. But first, in the planning side. So again, the mayor came in and he ran on a bunch of campaign promises, similar to many politicians, right? My focus is on jobs, jobs, jobs. He was running in 2010. We need to create a clean and green city, right? We must be a city of lifelong learners. I want to make Louisville the most compassionate city in the world. How do you measure compassion, right? I was the performance improvement officer. I needed to figure out how we were going to measure compassion and then improve it. So that was a challenge, and I wanted to distill all of this down into tangible results that we could communicate not only to citizens, but also to our employees. right? If you're working in public works and assets and you're part of solid waste management and you're picking up trash every day, what are you doing to make our city more clean and more green? What does that actually mean to you? If you're a paramedic on an ambulance and you are trying to display compassion to our citizens, what does that mean? How are we defining this and how are we going to measure it? And then for citizens, how can we truthfully and honestly show you at the end of 4 years or 8 years that we've actually delivered on the promises that we made to you? That our city is actually cleaner and greener, that we have been more compassionate, that there are more jobs, that there are higher levels of educational attainment. So to distill that all out, we put in place a system, a planning process, which is the wheel that you see up there at the top left-hand corner. And for our city government, that didn't exist previously. So when I came in and asked folks, what is it we're trying to do? Where's our plan? You know, people laughed at me. They were like, plans are useless. There's no value in a plan. It's just a writing exercise. Some of them said, oh, we do have a plan. We had a consultant come in 2007, and I think it's here somewhere. And you know, they looked around, and they pulled something out of a shelf, and they dusted it off, and nobody was working the plan. It was obviously not relevant or valid for any of them. And so I felt very strongly that if we didn't take the mayor's campaign promises, the things that citizens were saying to him in his monthly meetings with citizens, that these things needed to change, and translate those down to the front lines, then the bureaucratic ship that is Metro government was just going to keep going on its course, right? It's sort of like the captain calling up to headquarters and saying, yeah, I'll be in port tomorrow, but he never tells the crew. And so the crew doesn't actually steer towards port. The crew just keeps steering straight ahead. And so how do you get that message down? And our planning process was something that we put in place to be able to do that, and to do that in a way that it would map and inform our budgeting process. And so that's what that cycle is. And then we said, well, we don't want to make a document. We don't want this PDF that's going to sit on somebody's shelf and nobody's going to look at it. Let's put this out to citizens. Let's make a website that every department director, every citizen, every employee can go to and say, oh, this is our community's strategic plan. 6-year strategic plan, 5 objectives, 21 goals. Great. Now we've got it. And when we formed those goals, again, to address the, well, what does success look like, we wanted to look at data. Data to inform and make sure that we were making smart goals, goals that could be measured, goals that were achievable, goals that were realistic. In some cases, we had great information. We were able to say, all right, this is the target we need to be driving towards. This is going to be great. In other areas, we didn't have a lot of great information. One of the goals that we set out in our initial strategic plan was improve wages and create more jobs. And that's pretty much what we said, create more jobs. And we said we want to be in the top quartile of our peer cities. But again, it was hard to know, like, well, what's the number then? How many jobs? What type of jobs? How much do we need to raise our income levels to? And this slide is interesting, especially for those who may really like data. Others, it might make your head hurt. I'm sorry. But on the x-axis down here is median annual wages. And on the y-axis, what you see are the percentage and concentration of these types of jobs within Louisville. The one line there means that you're at the national average. So if you're below the one line, that means you don't have very many jobs in Louisville in the entertainment field. We actually have like none. We do have a lot of jobs in transportation and material moving, probably because of UPS being the logistics center being headquartered there, right? Now, if you're looking at this, what you really should pick up on also is that what you want are a lot of jobs over in the top right-hand corner, because those are the highest paying jobs, and those are jobs that you have in high concentration. The size of the bubbles means the number of jobs within that occupational area that you have in your city. We weren't really looking at this initially, right? This is now, we're in our 3rd year. We've started to really dig into data. We started with what we had initially, and we said, okay, this is good enough. Let's put that goal out there, and then let's get more data and information as we go, and let's refine this goal and get smarter about what we're driving towards. So we started benchmarking other cities. This is Portland, Oregon. And I can tell you Austin and Atlanta and Charlotte and other cities look a lot like this. They've got a lot more activity in that top right-hand corner, right? And they all have things in those right-hand corners that are quite similar, whether it's life and physical sciences, computer and math, architecture and engineering, management, those are the types of things. And so what we're doing is we're using this information to inform where Louisville is going to need to work to move these bubbles. And my arrows got dropped off, but I will tell you what we were trying to do. Shift some of these bubbles up into that right-hand corner. So when we talk about creating jobs, it's not just any job. We want to create jobs in business and financial. We want to create jobs in computer and math. And we want to do it, computer and math jobs in advanced manufacturing, right? Because that's our industry cluster. So we're taking this information and we're combining it with the industry clusters that we're already really strong in as a city and saying, okay, now this is a much smarter, realistic goal. We can be competitive if we focus in on these areas, and we can create more jobs, and we can hopefully raise the wages. Because right now, Louisville's wages are hovering around $37,000 for a median annual wage. And we really want to see that rise. We want to see that continue to increase, and that will make us more competitive. There's my arrows. Did you get it? There they are. So those are the ones. The life and physical science is interesting. It's in red because it's so far below the line that that's maybe not one where we're going to put a lot of energy. Let's double down in the areas that we've already got some momentum and movement, and that one, probably not. So this is how we're using data in the strategic planning side. The other thing that I think you'll find interesting is as we looked at the goals on our plan in the first year, and admittedly that first year that strategic plan was created by inputs such as the mayor's campaign promises, meetings that he had with citizens, talk to Greg's, he would go out and he would sit with community members. Our Metro Call 311 data, what were citizens complaining the most about, and what our department directors in Metro government said were and should be priorities. Those are the things that we focused on initially. When we looked the next year and we were getting ready for our annual planning retreat, where we take everybody for a day and we put them out there and we say, let's look at how much progress we made against our plan and what we need to do differently, we recognized that what we needed to have were community partners in those meetings. We needed to have the head of the public school system. Louisville doesn't run the school system, the city government doesn't. We have a separate superintendent. Yet we had a goal on there about increasing educational attainment. Well, that's a community goal, and that's going to take the work of the public school system, it's going to take the work of the universities, it's going to take the work of the community colleges, it's going to take the work of parents, students, city government, everybody. And so we needed to make sure that we started to bring community partners together in these dialogues. These pictures here are from our last strategic planning retreat. The head of our local community college is at one of the tables. The head of our Chamber of Commerce is sitting with the mayor at another table, talking about our jobs goals. Our chief of police is at a table with community activists, talking about crime and that initiatives that they're working on to try and reduce crime in our city. And so this community dialogue has become really important for us, and we've started to really drive more towards a model of collective impact against some of our bigger goals. I'll give you just a quick example. 55,000 degrees, like I said, educational attainment is one of the community goals that we're trying to drive towards in our city. And the goal of attaining 55,000 degrees by 2020 meant that we would have 50% of our working age adults would have an associate's degree or higher in the community by 2020 if we hit this goal. The importance of the data is to help show us whether or not we're making progress against that goal. It was a 10-year goal, started in 2010, just before this mayor took office. It's a true public-private partnership. The mayor previously started this with other foundations in the community, the business community, the school systems, to say we all need to work towards this goal. This was the 2014 report that they just pulled out. The mayor, as the chair of the board of 55K, pulled all those community members together and said, we're not on track to meet our goal. At this rate, we won't hit that goal until 2030. So while we've got the highest level of citizens with a degree above associates than we've ever had in our community, it's still not good enough, right? We've done great work, but we've got to do more. How do we keep working? How do we not take our eye off of that target? And so the data has been really helpful there. The other thing that conversation and that data has helped us do is when we bring all those community partners together, people started to say, well, I can do more. I'm doing a lot. And we need to connect all of this. It's not just about post-secondary education, which 55,000 degrees is mostly focused on, But if you're going to attain 55,000 more degrees, you need to make sure that the public school system is preparing kids for college, and that kids are actually going to college and staying in college. So Jefferson County Public Schools is focused on K through 12 success. Well, for kids to be successful in K through 12, and you all know this, and I think you've got an initiative similar to this going on in the area, you need to focus on early childhood care and pre-K and earlier. And so Metro United Way has come on as a sponsor to sort of drive that pillar of work and identify metrics and goals that they're going to focus on there. And so now we've got this whole system on the end. EG&I stands for Economic Growth and Innovation, which was a city department. We've got the Department of Kentuckiana Works, which does our workforce development grants. And that's about, okay, if you've got folks who didn't make it through the career system, but they want to get associate's degrees or certifications and things that are going to make them productive and citizens with higher annual wages, what are we doing there? And so now we've created this entire collective impact system around the data and the goals that we have as a community. So that's all of the things we're trying to do, and a little bit of how we're measuring and tracking progress against it through our governance efforts. In Louisville, we've also started something to help us track performance internally. I won't spend much time on it, but it's called Louisville Statistics, or Louis Stat. And similar to putting our strategic plan out to citizens, we also put our Louis Stat data and information out. And Louis Stat is just a series of regular meetings where the mayor meets with his department leadership to talk about operational performance metrics. How well are those city departments performing? Some of those metrics might be high-level administrative metrics about their budget, about safety, about the metro call numbers and complaints about that department, but others then drive to true operations for the department. What's the live release rate in our animal services department? What is the response time for our fire department? What do crime rates look like across the city for police? And then we put those up, again, on department pages where citizens can go and see a status of what those metrics look like. And I will just say that through this process of Louis Stat, internal to city government, we've seen great results. We've seen a continual decrease in things like lost time injury rate. And my favorite anecdote about this, and I'll share it because I just think it's so powerful to looking at data and asking critical questions about how well you're doing and are you performing at best in class for your functional area can do. We had a meeting with the Public Works and Assets Department. It was one of our first departments to come into Louis Stat. We were looking at the lost time injury rate, and that basically means how many employees are out of work due to injuries sustained on the job at one time. And their rate in one of their divisions was 33%. So in any one day, 33 out of 100 employees were not at work because of injuries that they had sustained on the job. Now, I couldn't believe it. I thought it had to be an error. And when we asked the department director about it, he said, well, of course our injuries are high. I mean, we're jumping on enough trucks all day, we're lifting heavy things. That's just the nature of our business. We're gonna have a lot of injuries. And we said, okay, I'm willing to believe you if you bring me benchmarks. Find me the lost time injury rates in other cities and or in the private sector company that also works in our county doing waste management. And let me know what their LTI rate is. And to the department director's credit, he came back the next forum and he said, I wouldn't believe it if I hadn't talked to this person myself and if I didn't trust him myself. Because if it was somebody else, I wouldn't have believed him. But he said, I called Waste Management, a private company in our city. Last year they had 0 injuries. He's like, I didn't even think that was possible. And so, it was, for me, it's still, I think, just such a powerful moment because what it did was it made a mindset shift in his head. I mean, think about it. If you're in a department with a director and with management team that just assumes you're going to get injured on the job, what are you doing to make your employees safe? Versus if you're in a department where the director believes that we could have 0 injuries. And so 33% of our employees out on injuries is not acceptable. And so over the course of the last few years, and it's maybe hard to see, but this is Public Works over here. And so at one point, they were 25% for the overall department. I was giving you the division level data. But they're now down to, I think, what does that say, 6% or something. I mean, they continue to drive that down. And they put in place things that didn't cost very much, right? A stretching program So before our crews go out on the garbage trucks in the morning, they do calisthenics and stretching. They also are holding each other accountable for safety precautions. 3 points of contact on a truck. If you don't have that, I'm going to tell you about it because I don't want to see you get hurt. You know, just things that they weren't doing before because, again, they just assumed that they were going to get injured on the job. We also are doing a lot in open data. So we're doing a lot of this to look at the performance and the productivity of our departments. But then we also have been really involved in the push for open data, putting the raw information out to citizens so they can figure out what they are going to do with it. And in some cases, we convert it into useful information. So this is information from our raw data website, visualized for police incidents and crime incidents across our city. And so there was a lot of concern about putting this out there and what it was going to mean, what people were going to do with this information. It's all public information anyways. Anybody can submit an open records request and get this data. And so we were just proactively putting this information out there. But there's a lot of good that can come from this information as well. So some of the success stories that I'll just share with you really quickly that we've seen from the open data work. There's been new businesses started from some of our entrepreneurs. There was a criminal justice dashboard that was created by some local code developers that came in from Code for America. And that dashboard basically shows judges sitting on the bench in real time the number of inmates we have in our jail system. We had a real problem with overcrowding in our jails, and yet we didn't have anybody getting put into some of the alternative placement programs that we had in our city. And so they're able to see what alternative programs are available with space in them versus putting folks into the jail system, and it's had a real impact for us. We also, I'll say, for all of our efforts, we've been providing free coding classes through our local library. We just got a $2.9 million federal grant to extend that program to other counties to continue to train and educate folks who may not have any other educational degree on how to be computer coders and programmers and then go find jobs in that really high-paying industry and field. I'm going to try and rush through this last part, and I'll just say that to do all of this, it requires changing mindsets and changing behaviors of employees in city government and recognizing that they need to get new skills to be able to do the work that we're asking them to do in new ways. And so we've done a lot to try and foster that change, especially around putting in place some of the things I've already mentioned: lean process improvement, Six Sigma, things that come from traditionally a manufacturing background. We've taken them and put them into the services industry. And these are just a couple of other examples, again, from work that when we noticed in Louis Stat there was an area for improvement, we then took a team of employees who'd been trained in some of those improvement methodologies and put them against the issue. One of them for us was our public health facilities. This is the improvement that was made there, again, from 10% of our facilities not being inspected on time to less than 0.1%. Ambulance turnaround time, how long it takes the ambulances to drop off a patient, clean the ambulance, fill out their paperwork, and get back on the street. Some ambulances it took 40 minutes, some ambulances it took 20 minutes. How do we get the average down, making sure that they're still doing quality checks and cleaning and transfers? So these have been the key elements that we've put in place in Louisville to drive performance. And I will just leave you with a few lessons learned that we've had that might be important for you if you're trying to do this here in in Grand Rapids. But adapting a lean startup mentality, being very okay with 60% solutions. Don't wait for 100%, don't wait for perfect. Just get it started, get it moving, learn as you go, and adapt and refine as you go. Know that the questions that you ask matter. Data can, there can be a lot of data and information out there, and it can overwhelm people, and it can be useless if it's not pulled together in the right way and it's not being used to answer the questions that you really care about. It will never be perfect, like I said, so don't wait for the data to be perfect either. Put it out there and start improving it. And make all of this public. Transparency does not need to be that scary. It can really be used for continuous improvement and galvanizing community action around some of the things that are most important for citizens. So, thank you very much.